Well, hello and thank you for joining me for another Alex on Tech and iTWire video. I'm joined today by Matt Calkins. He is the co-founder and CEO of global low-code technology business Appian, and whom Forbes magazine described last year in a profile as a billionaire, a board game god, and tech's hidden disruptor. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, Matt, you have an excellent and must-watch video at your site featuring you, which explains what Appian does, how low-code works, how it is 10 to 20 times faster than traditional methods at writing code in apps, how Appian translates your ideas into apps, how you can easily change your app after it is made, how your software can now move at the speed of thought as opposed to being the last thing to change, and more. And I'll absolutely be embedding that video in the article into which this video is located. But what advancements and innovations has low code that the way Appian does it made in 2020?
The low code has changed a lot since I did that video, and it hasn't even been all that long. As you point out, it was last year. I think it was the beginning of 2019. I made that video because I was frustrated that so many people were finding it confusing to know what low code was. And I believed it was simple, and I wanted to communicate with people in a simple way. Low code is programming, essentially. It's just telling a computer what to do, but it's doing it in a very human way. In this case, in a drawing, in a workflow, in a flowchart, in a way that humans can understand so that it's easy for us to create the instruction and it's easy for us later to change it. Low code is a new way to design software. It's an expedited way, and it'll multiply your effectiveness by 10 to 20 times. That's been true for a decade, and we've been working on low code for a long time. We were the first low code company to go public. Our IPO was 3.5 years ago, and we're the first company to go public as a low code firm. I think we've probably got the largest revenue of any low code pure play as well. However, low code has changed a lot, and in 2020, this was a big year, a turning point in the history of low code. The pandemic has put new emphasis on technologies that allow organizations to be agile. Low code, because it allows you to rapidly define a new application or rapidly change one that you've already got, is an accelerator for behavioral change. And that's just what organizations need now. That's digital transformation, that's agility, and it's the theme technologically of 2020. So low code has been elevated since I made that video. We now understand that low code or a similar agility platform is necessary for all businesses, all organizations in the world. And our job is to make it easy so that every organization has at its fingertips the ability to change as it needs to or as it wants to.
And as I remember seeing on the website and you speaking about, I mean, you have some of the world's biggest companies and some, you have a select customer base. You don't want to work with everybody because you need to spend that time, perfecting what you do and helping those customers do things with code that they couldn't do before.
Well, it's very important for us to be the best at the things that we do. And whatever focus we need to give in order to be the best, we're willing to give that focus. Appian's been grown over 2 decades, a little bit more than 2 decades now. I've been running it that whole time. And we've always prided our innovation and our customer success over growth or anything else.
Now, it's always interesting to find out how Appian started. When I was young, I remember a lot of talk was about object-oriented programming, which sounds like an early version of what you're doing today. So what gave you the idea to work in this low-code way? And what was the catalyst that made you want to stop what you were doing and start Appian?
Well, I definitely remember object-oriented programming. Now, to me, it was early in the life cycle of Appian. We were a personalization firm, which means we were using algorithms to match people with information that was pertinent to them. And that was an interesting business. But I happened across this concept where you could draw a picture and it would become an application, and I just loved it. Back then, it was called BPM, or Business Process Management. And it's been known by a few names over the last 15 to 20 years. But the concept, the simplicity, seemed so important to me. I knew that over time, the world would be demanding exponentially more applications, and it wouldn't have exponentially more people with which to write them. And so there was going to have to be an increased efficiency. We were going to have to get more applications per human hour. And that is as true today as it was back then. That trend is unescapable. And that's why I believe that most applications written in this decade, in the 2020s, are going to have to be written with low code. That's true around the world for all organizations. I felt that we were just onto a big idea. And as soon as I saw that idea, I wanted Appian to be part of it. And so this is 15 years ago, maybe more. And so we just pivoted the business right into it, and we've been focusing on that ever since.
Now, you also speak about how digital transformation, which is the buzzword that we've all heard endlessly over the past few years, really hasn't lived up to the hype, but that with Appian transforming the way a company's software works and is written can truly be achieved in a profoundly meaningful way. So can you please tell us a bit more?
Yeah, digital transformation is something people were talking about for years, but they weren't really doing it. It meant using technology to be more fluid in the way we responded to customer demand, and therefore, and more coordinated, and therefore a better customer experience as a result. And that implied agility, it implied responsiveness, it implied unification, it implied many different work factors getting on the same page and reading off the same script. And it was a big vision. It was something that companies love to talk about. They love to aim at. They love to put it in their budget and tell their board and their investors that they were doing it, but they didn't really have to do it, and very few of them actually succeeded. Then 2020 comes along, and it turns out that kind of fluidity and unification and coordination and different people reading off the same script is quite necessary in an emergency. And so now digital transformation is getting a second look, a more serious look. And it's, I believe today, it's finally being established as a necessity, not just a big idea that it's good to talk about, but something that every business needs to have.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been sort of waves of digital transformation where, 10 years ago people started. I mean, over that period of time, technology matures and you sort of almost have to start again, but because the building blocks you started with became out of date and you sort of had some failed digital transformation efforts. It's a little bit like version 1 apps from 10 years ago that are vastly different to the apps that you can obviously create today.
That's right. In the history of technology, we just keep pursuing the same ends. We want speed. We want more information, right? And we come up with new words for it every few years, and we come up with new waves of technology, and it seems like a new thing, but I tell you, we're after the same few virtues again and again.
Now, more buzzwords that we've heard a lot about recently are artificial intelligence, machine learning, and robotic process automation. Now, automation used to mean replacing people with technology, something that I read from a forward in a book we're going to talk about in a moment. But, that replacing people with technology is what the Luddites were against way back when. And, automation today means complementing people with digital helpers. And in physical robotics, I was talking to the Australian head of SoftBank Robotics, and we were also chatting about cobots or co-working robots. And I guess that's a physical version of the same kind of concept. But your new book is called HyperAutomation, which brings true maturity and sophistication to the automation process and augments it to the next level. So can you please explain hyperautomation further and why this is an unmissable trend that is changing everything?
Yeah, this is going to be big. This is emerging right now, and it's going to be one of the most important trends over the next few years. Automation means using a workflow to bring together different kinds of workers. As you mentioned, it's not just humans doing work anymore. It's artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotic process automation, bots, and other factors which may come online soon. We're all going to have to work together. We've got different strengths. Those strengths should be complementary. It's absolutely not about taking a robot and giving them a human's job. They can't do a human job, and they wouldn't be good at it.
Yeah.
Instead, we need to be able to rely on robots to help us with the things that you don't need a human intelligence to do, and allow us to use our human abilities to do human things, higher value things. And so we want bots, AI, and humans to coordinate together in a workflow, to complement, to delegate to each other, to share work. And in order to do that, we're going to have a strong, open, tech-agnostic workflow layer that's capable of coordinating those different factors to combine and collaborate to the same job. So that's automation. Hyperautomation is a new version of that word that puts particular emphasis on a strong process management layer, which after all is the most important layer. And having a muscular process management layer means that you can also combine information, scale, stay secure, keep data anywhere in the enterprise, and unify it at the moment of decision. The functions that we would rely on for a strong workflow layer are all the more important when you're delegating work to multiple actors. So that's hyperautomation. It's like taking automation to another level, scaling it up for enterprise level tasks.
And that's the story of technology, everything being scaled up, taken to the next level, and then expanding human minds and thinking to be able to see this new reality and do something unexpected and amazing with it.
Yeah.
Okay, so obviously there's plenty more in the book, and I look forward to reading it. But before we get to this, COVID-19 has obviously been the elephant-sized virus in the room that has radically fast-forwarded business perception around IT and change into warp factor 9.9. How has COVID-19 changed Appian? How big of a boost has it brought your business as every other business seeks to innovate and change faster than the changing world around them and to survive?
Yeah, let me start by talking about how COVID is going to change other businesses and how the IT department is going to be affected. You know, for a long time, the IT department has been the department of using technology to save money.
Yeah.
And I think that COVID marks a turning point where IT is now firmly expected to allow an organization, to enable an organization to adapt fast enough to survive. It isn't about saving money. It wasn't about saving money this year. It was about saving lives, saving confidence, saving relationships, and that created for IT a new and more important than ever profile in the organization. I think this is a big year for IT, a year in which IT earns trust and centrality in businesses that it has never had before. So I think this is an important threshold and one from which we will never go back. Organizations had become software driven and software run almost without realizing that they had. The typical organization does almost everything that it does in software. It gets new clients, it uploads clients, it handles processes, it makes their payments, it does payroll, everything that an organization does at scale, it does in software. And yet, software had still been a back office phenomenon. And that meant that we were putting up with limitations on software that are inappropriate if we consider software to be a strategic tool instead of a cost-saving tool. For example, software had traditionally been extremely hard to modify, update, or change. And as a result, the typical IT organization was sitting atop 100 to 1,000 silos of uncoordinated, unconnected, and uncollaborative applications, which had to be used one at a time, had their own logins, data structures, security vulnerabilities, and were not at all able to evolve in the case of an emergency or if rapid change were necessitated, perhaps by regulation. As such, we had a situation where organizations were held back in their ability to change by software, by the most ephemeral element in the organization. Ideas, software is fundamentally just ideas, were holding back the ability of organizations to change. In fact, I believe they could have changed nearly anything about themselves faster than they could have changed their software. They could have changed their logo, their management team, they could have split their stock, they could have moved to a new headquarters. There's nearly nothing that an organization couldn't have done faster than it could change its software, which again is simply ideas. I don't believe that that's going to be an acceptable situation in the future. I believe 2020 has taught us that software and ideas need to move quickly, need to pull us into the future instead of anchor us in the past. We're going to expect our software to be malleable in a way that it didn't used to be. We'll expect leadership out of IT, not just cost savings. I think this was an important year in showing that IT can lead, even must lead in a crisis, and that software, far from being something that keeps us from behaving in a new way, should be the vanguard of new behaviors.
Look, I heard it said several years ago that, people would have an IT department and talk about the IT guys and treat it as a separate thing. And of course, the realization they should have had was that they didn't just have an IT department; they were an IT company. Even if they were doing construction or whatever it was, and everything you've just said encapsulates that. And of course, I mean, you're in the luxurious position of being the company that helps people to recreate, remodel, rethink, and software. And as I was saying before, move at the speed of thought rather than software being the very last thing that can change. And that's that's a pretty cutting edge and advanced place to be. And no doubt you guys are really benefiting from that position.
I think so, but I think also we're helping from this position. We've been thinking for a long time about how to use software to enable change and how to empower organizations to define themselves in their patterns, in their software processes. And so we can help.
Yeah.
It is remarkable, as you say, how many organizations don't know that they're software companies. Most of them are software companies, and they just don't think of themselves that way, but really they are. And a moment like this, when we have to change quickly, and you realize that we're everything about this organization is now software. That's a moment when an organization realizes that it is a software company, and it'll have to focus on software accordingly.
That's when they reach the next level in the game. And I mean, we'll talk about games in a sec, but with the new book, HyperAutomation, can you please tell us about some of the great authors that have contributed chapters and some of the most insightful lessons that people can learn about in the book, HyperAutomation?
Oh, I'm glad you brought it up. I'm excited about this book. We could have just written a book about automation or hyperautomation and had it be all of our own marketing material, right? I would have written a piece, and the head of marketing could write a piece, and we'd get a lot of Appian employees to put their opinions down, and that would be of moderate value. You would have gotten Appian's perspective on hyperautomation, but we didn't do that. Instead, we reached out to the world's leading experts, analysts, influencers, bloggers, leaders, and we asked them to write about hyperautomation. And so what you've got here now, there's maybe a couple of chapters written by Appian. I wrote the foreword. I wrote one of them, and Gary Kasparov wrote the other. And our CTO wrote a section. So you're going to get the Appian perspective if you read this book. But equally importantly, you're going to get a diverse perspective from thought leaders around the world. And I think that's the real difference in this book. It's not just one company's perspective. It's the diverse perspective of many thought leaders about what is hyperautomation, where is it taking us.
Yeah, and that's giving a rounded view. And that's a really good way of approaching it. I mean, I always like to open up Google News, open up half a dozen tabs on the same story and read everybody's perspective and then come up with my own thoughts about it as I write my own story. So, I'm going to enjoy reading this book and learning. So what is the future of low code? How will it evolve over the next few years? What are the trends for businesses, not only here in Australia, but also where you are in the US and all over the world? And, what will low code look like in 2030, for example?
Yeah, well, we're in a wave moment for low code. What a couple of years ago was obscure will a couple of years from now be ubiquitous. Everyone is going to be expected to do low code, buy low code, provide low code, have low code as part of their suite. It's going to be universal. And as it becomes universal, it's going to also lose a bit of its sharpness in definition. Because if everybody needs to be low code, then they're going to put whatever they have out there and say that it is. So there's going to be differentiation between the types of low code. And the type that we do won't be the same type that everybody does. Appian specifically does low code for building sophisticated, powerful applications. And we do it with a workflow. And not all low code is going to be workflow centric, and not all of it is going to be for mission critical applications. So there's going to be sub-markets breaking up, but low code is going to be ubiquitous. It's one of the big new markets. And I think that nearly every substantial technology, certainly all the stack vendors, all the tech giants, they're all going to have an offering in this space. And then we're going to keep pioneering it.
I know that every time whenever you get a new car, suddenly you notice that same car on the road everywhere, and you never noticed it before. And ever since I've been preparing for this interview, I've seen press releases, I've seen billboards. I'm in Canberra, which is a government city like Washington, D.C., so you have all the big companies here. And, I see big billboards from companies say low code, and I've seen press releases. So I've started seeing it everywhere, but no doubt you have too. And as you said, it's quality that's going to really matter as to who's got the real system in place with the foundational things, as opposed to just simply saying, hey, we're doing this because it's the latest buzzword. Now,
right. We welcome all of the new attention on low code, because the more people are asking the question, the more people will find the Appian answer. We've got a distinctive answer. It's going to be the best at what it is, and our audience will find us.
Now, one of the things that I learned about you, which was fascinating, is that you have a real love of board games. I read that you have got over 700 of them, and you love to study the mechanics of how they work, and that there are incredible parallels between them and the way that business works and the way that Appian creates its software for low-code creativity. So what are your favorite board games, besides the two that I've read you've created, and what truly makes a great game stand out to you, and what else can you tell us about this fascinating side of your life?
Well, I do love board games, and I have my whole life. I love their complexity. I love that they're competitive and that you can win or lose. And because of that, they're a great learning mechanism. If you don't win, you can think about why you didn't and learn from your mistakes. I also like them because they're a simplification of reality. And as a designer of board games, not just a player, as a designer, I love to start with a complex phenomenon. Like I wrote one that had to do with that simulated the war in Japan that founded the Tokugawa shogunate in the year 1600. Mm-hmm. And so I started by reading a lot of history of that conflict and that society, and what factors led to the outcome that happened. And based on those studies, I was able to extract a few mechanisms and then model those mechanisms logically in the game in order to give the players a feeling of really being in that situation and being able to affect the outcome of the struggle in the same ways that the historical protagonists affected the outcome of the original struggle. I love that connection between infinitely complex reality and a working model, which, while not as accurate, gives the essence of what happened. Now, that ability to model is important, whether you're building a game or building a company or just communicating with someone the essence of a situation. And so I find it very applicable to business. However, you asked what my favorite games were that I hadn't written. So my favorites are usually relatively heavy, which is to say complex business-oriented games. And I'll pick three. I like Power Grid, Automobile, and Acquire.
Okay, I'll have to check those out. I haven't heard of those, but if you like them, they're bound to be good. Now, it's obviously also no surprise then that you have Garry Kasparov, the world chess champion and player of one of the oldest board games in existence, writing the foreword for your book.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure working with Garry. We've done a few projects together. He's a great guy, and I really admire what he does. Not just being the world champion in chess and maybe the best chess player in history, but also as an activist for human rights, mm-hmm. and as a thinker about artificial intelligence. He's a multi-talented and very insightful person, and we're really pleased to work with him. I also got to interview him for our most recent conference, and so that was also a pleasure.
And is that interview available to watch on YouTube?
I don't know, but it will be if it isn't available yet. In fact, we can check back with you and be sure that you can link to it.
Sure, because that would be
when you.
That would be fascinating to watch. Yeah, you and him together. I'm sure it would have been a great conversation. Now, I always like to ask people if they could please share some of the best advice that they've received in life to help them get where they are today. But I watched the video where somebody was filming you as you drove around, And you said some really interesting things
Yeah.
about advice tending to fail because people didn't listen as they needed to learn the lesson for themselves. And you also said that the data that leads to the conclusion, you said, could be more important than the conclusion itself, and that the discovery of why rather than just the what was of great interest to you. So can you please tell us more about this and some great insights into why that really struck you as truly valuable lessons to learn from?
I remember making that video. Everything I said was just off the top of my head, and I don't remember what it was that I said. I've never watched the video, and so I can't be absolutely sure it's the same thing. But let me say that one of the most important pieces of advice I would give someone is be committed to finding the truth. I think in life or in business or in whatever that you do, being committed to finding the truth is going to help you make constant improvements. It is human nature to wish to draw conclusions with which we are comfortable, conclusions that comfort us. And those conclusions are not the same, probably, as reality. And so we're always distorting the way we interpret the world in a way that makes us more comfortable. And so one of the first pieces of advice I would give anyone is strictly deny yourself that comfort. Instead, be willing to see the world and embrace it as the uncomfortable thing that it is, right? And learn from that. That's the beginning of building great feedback loops, which is a good thing if you're a gamer too. If you're willing to see the world the way it is, not in a comfortable way, but in the real way, then you'll see feedback loops in everything, and you should be looking for them. They're as important to a person going through life as they are to a rock climber going up a cliff face. Every bit of progress you make is going to be because you perceived the results of your last progress. And by facing that and perceiving it directly, seeking out that feedback, following your actions to their consequences and learning from those consequences, you can make every day a learning process, just as if you were, this would come naturally if you were at a game board, because the feedback would be facing you. As soon as you finish the game, you'd have won or lost. But real life's not like that. You have to hunt down the truth of whether you won or lost and of why you won or lost. But if you do hunt it down and you insist on finding it and then you learn from it, then you'll find yourself getting much better at the things you do much more quickly than others who aren't as insistent on seeking those feedback loops.
Well, look, we're down to the last. Actually, there's still 3 or 4 questions here, but that's okay. Now, I was going to ask you that you mentioned in that interview, which I will embed into the article that this video will appear in, that you love to read biographies more than business books, because again, there were some really great lessons about why that led to the what, which resonated within you. So what are some of the most interesting biographies you've read that you could recommend to us?
Oh, well, I do love biographies, and I've read so many of them. I like them in all fields, not just business. I like science, philosophy, military history, music, art, just anything. I find life stories so interesting. Now, my favorite of the past year, I mean, it's hard for me to pick a favorite overall. I wouldn't know where to go with that. But my favorite of the last year was a biography of Cornelius Vanderbilt by T.J. Stiles called The First Tycoon. And I loved that because it turns out that the first tycoon isn't so different from the last tycoon. The things that it takes to be a good entrepreneur are still the same. And Cornelius Vanderbilt was an entrepreneur by taking ships across the New York harbor and pioneering steam and pioneering rail and cutting a track through the Nicaraguan jungle to get 49ers from the East Coast to the West Coast to the United States. But throughout it all, he was an advanced perceiver, a courageous decision maker. He was a reliable person, but very forceful. He was confident. He knew how to deploy capital. He figured out the stock market back when most people didn't know how it would work, when it was still in its earliest stages of evolution. But he was a terrific adapter to circumstance, a visionary, and with a tremendous personal wherewithal and confidence. And I loved reading this and realizing how much it is still in common between what makes maybe a great entrepreneur at the very beginning of the definition of a corporation and the possibility of a public institution, all the way up to the present day. I mean, he would have succeeded in any circumstance, any of those decades. And it's great to note the qualities that it took to be successful.
I bet he would have loved low code. Now, the last three questions. What have been your biggest challenges in life, and how did you overcome them? And what are you still working on?
All right. Wow. Okay, well, starting this business was a big challenge, and we did it without funding. And that was 21 years ago. We took the hard way. Back then, in the late 90s, it seemed like everybody was taking a lot of venture funding in order to get their business rolling, and we didn't. In order to feel that it was always we, the founders, who were running the company and not the money that was running the company. And because of that, we allowed ourselves a greater scope of action. We were capable of making unpopular decisions without having to check them with a board or an investor. We could be the iconoclasts we wanted to be. But as a result, we had to grow more slowly and could only fund the business proportional to our own profits. That was a struggle. And particularly when we got into the process market at first, we were a bootstrap without any investments. And our top three competitors between them had about $250 million of venture funding across those three companies. And they were very well established. And we walked right into the market because we loved the idea of the market. But we didn't realize just how outgunned we were going to be. And it took years for us to rise to the top of that market. So that's probably the greatest professional challenge, getting into that market and rising through it. But of course, there have been so many challenges along the way. I'm glad that we took the slow road in some ways because it allowed me to develop as a leader while we were developing as a company. When I started this business, I was 26 years old, and I think it definitely helped me to build my experience as we grew at a moderate pace on our way to where we are today.
Organic growth, as opposed to venture capital, injections of steroids. So, second last question. You were asked in an Ameritrade interview about a year ago that I was watching online as I was trying to learn more about you. And one of the things that the lady and yourself were talking about were coders, STEM students, the high salaries, and the rest, which everyone has heard about. So I've just made me think, is Appian working with the education sector, user groups, homeschooling, primary, secondary, university, and more to educate young people about the way Appian is changing the coding paradigm in all the ways that you describe in your video, explaining how low code and Appian works in all the ways you've described today?
Yeah, we are. And I think it's a great thing for people who are graduating now to learn the new ways in which applications will be developed. I would recommend to any college student that they understand low code. This is going to be a great boost to them in their career. The previous generation knows how to write applications, but they know how to write it in less efficient languages that'll take a long time to create an application. And when they're done, the application will be relatively inflexible. So if you want to steal a march on your competitors in the workplace, then learn a technology that'll accelerate you, that'll allow you to create something faster and change it better. And so low code is a great thing to work on. There's a school we work at that provides a great example of this. One of the 10 largest universities in the United States is called the University of South Florida. Now, I know I'm picking a U.S. example, even though we work at multiple universities in Australia closer by. But this one, I want to use this as an example because they're gigantic, for one, but also because literally everyone in the university is an Appian user. Every student, every administrator, they communicate with each other using Appian, works on desktops, works on every mobile device that these students have, and all of the development for every application that is used across the entire school is written by the students. The students learn about Appian, and then they write the applications that the school needs, and I love that. I love that they're their own ecosystem, and they're providing all the applications that they require. And at the same time, they're educating the next generation of developer on the most modern technologies.
And I guess with every year, the new freshmen come in and have been bursting with ideas, and they must have this regular upgrading of all of their apps and infrastructure at a scale that probably surprises even you.
It's great to see. There's so much innovation. If you take the friction away, innovation can really fly.
So my final message is always the same. What is your final message to iTWire viewers and readers, and to your current and future customers and partners?
What is my message? All right. My message is that change is essential and speed is addictive. Now that we know that it's possible to create applications quickly and to modify them quickly, we'll never go back. Once a customer achieves speed, they never give it up. And the customer could be your customer or it could be your business. Once we know speed is possible, we never go back. If you remember what happened when Google first came out and you could see at the bottom of a search page that it had taken a tenth of a second or something, at first it was shocking, but nobody had patience anymore for a multi-second query to Lycos or Alta Vista or whatever we used to use. The bar had been set and you never go back from speed. Or take Amazon Prime, for example. When I first signed up for Prime, I didn't think it was that important for me to get packages within second-day delivery, but now I wouldn't go back. Speed is one of the most important things, and if we don't ask for it, it's only because we didn't know we could ask for it. But now that it's possible, now that we see that it's important and even necessary and possible to change your applications quickly and let a business be led by its software, not held back by its software, I don't believe we'll ever go back. So this is the beginning of a new era in which software is ideas again. It's the way we guide an organization. And it's a lot more than just saving money. It's strategically positioning and fashioning our patterns in order to compete, to please our customers, and to be the company that we mean to be. I think it's an exciting beginning for low code and for automation, and we're pleased to be part of it.
Well, Matt Calkins, co-founder and CEO of Appian, it's been a real pleasure to talk to you. I hope we can talk again. I hope to meet you one day at a conference when we can all travel and the COVID is all behind us. And I'm going to have to investigate low code myself. I mean, it sounds like something I should be involved in, and I really appreciate the time you've taken to talk to me today and to the viewers. So thank you.
This has been my pleasure. Thank you, Alex.
Bye-bye.